The Vila McCord complex buzzed with the hum of thousands of alien delegates, their voices a symphony of languages blending into an incomprehensible cacophony. Commander Alaric Graves, humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Council, strode through the crowd, his steps measured and purposeful. His dark diplomatic uniform bore only a single insignia, a subtle nod to Earth's unassuming but resolute position in this assembly of galactic powers. He carried himself with the ease of a seasoned soldier, though his eyes scanned every face with the precision of a predator surveying potential threats. Alaric halted before the entrance to the central chamber, a towering set of crystalline doors engraved with symbols of unity. Beside him, a lanky aide from the Viralis species gestured nervously, their translucent skin flickering with blue light, a clear sign of anxiety in their kind. "Ambassador Graves, a word of caution," the aide murmured, their voice like a whisper carried on the wind. "The Zervath delegation is particularly vocal in their opposition to humanity's admission. They've been persistent." Alaric offered a small, disarming smile. "Persistence is admirable, but so is preparedness. I'm ready for whatever the Council throws at me." The aide hesitated, their glow dimming. "I hope so. They have a way of testing new species, sometimes harshly." Alaric inclined his head and stepped through the doors, his face betraying none of the tension that coiled in his chest like a spring. The chamber unfolded before him, a vast, circular arena where representatives from hundreds of species floated in suspended platforms. At its center stood the High Consul Vrikai, a towering figure whose golden exoskeleton gleamed like sunlight trapped in amber. His multifaceted eyes flickered as he regarded Alaric's entry. "The human ambassador arrives," Vrikai announced, his voice resonating through the chamber like a melody warped by static. "Earth seeks to join the Galactic Council. Let us hear what they have to offer." Alaric stepped onto the speaking platform, his posture unyielding under the weight of countless alien eyes. "Members of the Council," he began, his voice clear and deliberate. "Humanity comes not as conquerors or supplicants but as equals. We bring innovation, adaptability, and the capacity to forge alliances that strengthen us all." Murmurs rippled through the chamber, a few delegates exchanging skeptical glances. One platform floated closer, revealing a Zervath delegate, a reptilian creature with gleaming scales and a perpetual sneer. "Adaptability?" the Zervath hissed, their forked tongue flickering. "From a species that only recently learned to leave its atmosphere? What arrogance to presume you belong here." Alaric's expression didn't waver. "We've advanced rapidly because survival demanded it. Our history is one of overcoming impossible odds. I believe that history can enrich this council. Or destabilize it." Another voice interjected. A thin, sinewy being from the Gralith Collective leaned forward, their compound eyes reflecting faint irritation. "Humans are unpredictable. Your rapid rise is unnatural." Alaric opened his mouth to respond, but a sudden shift in the chamber's atmosphere silenced him. The Zervath delegate rose, their platform glowing in ominous red. "We demand proof of humanity's worth," the Zervath declared, their voice a challenge laced with venom. "Talk is cheap. Show us your merit." High Consul Vrikai tilted his head slightly, his antennae quivering in amusement. "An interesting proposition. Ambassador Graves, how do you respond to this demand for proof?" Alaric took a step forward, his gaze locking onto the Zervath. "Humanity has nothing to prove to the likes of you," he said evenly. "Our accomplishments speak for themselves." The Zervath let out a low, guttural laugh. "Then you will not object to a test of resolve." They snapped their clawed fingers, and suddenly, a group of figures emerged from the chamber's periphery, mercenaries clad in dark armor, their weapons glinting menacingly. Alaric's body tensed, though his face remained calm. He noticed the High Consul's faint smirk, the subtle shift in the mood of the chamber. This wasn't just an ambush, it was theater, a spectacle designed to humiliate humanity before the Council. "Prove your strength," the Zervath sneered, gesturing to the mercenaries. "Show us your adaptability." The mercenaries moved forward, their weapons primed. Alaric raised a hand, signaling them to stop. "I came here for diplomacy," he said, his voice low but carrying. Not bloodshed. Then you'll bleed. The Zervath spat, and the mercenaries surged toward him. Alaric moved like a coiled spring unleashed. In one fluid motion, he grabbed a ceremonial staff from a nearby pedestal, its crystalline structure shattering into jagged shards as he swung it with precision. The first mercenary fell, their weapon clattering to the ground. Gasps echoed through the chamber as Alaric ducked beneath a plasma bolt, his movements a blur of calculated efficiency. He drove the jagged end of the broken staff into a mercenary's chest plate, disabling their exosuit. Another attacker lunged at him, but Alaric spun, using the momentum to disarm them and hurl them into a pillar. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in shock, some retreating to the edges of their platforms, others watching in stunned silence. Alaric's every move was a statement. Humanity was not to be underestimated. In less than a minute, the last mercenary collapsed, clutching a fractured arm. Alaric stood amidst the carnage, breathing heavily but unbroken. He turned to face the Zervath, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Is this your idea of diplomacy?" he asked coldly. "Sending hired thugs to do what you lack the courage to attempt yourself?" The Zervath bristled, but before they could respond, High Consul Vrikai raised a hand, his tone placating but tinged with mockery. "Enough. Ambassador Graves has demonstrated humanity's resolve. Let us continue this discussion without further interruption." Alaric stepped back onto his platform, his gaze unwavering. He had come to the council prepared for scrutiny, but now he knew the stakes were higher than anticipated. Humanity's place in the galaxy would not be given, it would have to be earned, one battle at a time. The council chamber hummed with tension, a sharp undercurrent of unease rippling through the platforms as Alaric resumed his place. His hands rested lightly on the edge of the podium, though his knuckles were faintly white. Across the chamber, the Zervath delegate glared, a flicker of unease visible even beneath the cold gleam of their scales. Vrikai's multifaceted eyes twitched, his voice carrying a calm authority as he addressed the room. "It appears the human ambassador is resourceful," the High Consul remarked, his tone almost amused. "However, this council must deliberate whether resourcefulness alone is sufficient for membership. Let us reconvene tomorrow to determine humanity's place." The delegates murmured among themselves, their words lost in a rising tide of speculation. Alaric remained silent, his sharp gaze tracking every motion, every subtle exchange of glances. He wasn't naive enough to believe this was over. As the session adjourned, a soft, melodic voice spoke beside him. "Commander Graves. A moment, if you will." He turned to see Lorena, the representative of the Talari, whose kind were known for their neutral stance and unerring ability to uncover secrets. Her eyes, iridescent and unblinking, locked onto his. "I assume this isn't a congratulatory chat," Alaric replied evenly. "No," she said. "It's a warning. The Zervath won't let this rest. Their pride demands retaliation. The fact that you survived the ambush has embarrassed them more than your potential admission ever could. Let them try," Alaric said, his voice low. "I'll handle it." Lorena's lips curved in a faint smile. "I admire your confidence, but be cautious. The Zervath are cunning, and this isn't a battlefield. The council chambers operate under a different set of rules." Alaric nodded, his expression unchanging. "Thank you for the advice." As she departed, his hand slid to his waist, fingers brushing the concealed device embedded in his belt, a neural scanner designed to intercept encrypted transmissions. He had calibrated it during the session, tuning it to the Zervath's frequency. Now, as the chamber emptied, he activated it. The scanner buzzed faintly before locking onto a signal. Voices crackled through his earpiece, distorted but clear enough to decipher. "Unacceptable. He humiliated us in front of the entire council. We can't afford to let this stand." "Agreed," another voice replied, its tone clipped and precise. "But direct action has failed. We'll use the council's plan. It's already in motion." Alaric's jaw tightened. Vrikai's plan. He had suspected as much, but confirmation sharpened the edge of his focus. He shut off the scanner and exited the chamber, his stride purposeful as he headed for his quarters. The walls of the Velum Accord complex shimmered faintly in the artificial twilight, casting distorted reflections that felt almost alive. When he reached his quarters, Alaric locked the door and activated the room's security systems, ensuring no unwanted listeners. He placed the scanner on the desk and ran an analysis on the intercepted signal, piecing together fragments of data. Patterns emerged, a complex web of encrypted messages originating from Vrikai's private channels and linking to the Zervath delegation. The pieces began to fit together, a puzzle forming in his mind. The ambush hadn't been a simple show of strength by the Zervath. It was part of a broader strategy to undermine humanity's credibility, orchestrated by the very leader tasked with ensuring fairness. Vrikai didn't want Earth in the Council. His reasons remained unclear, but his methods were now undeniable. The scanner beeped, a new transmission cutting through the airwaves. Alaric leaned forward, listening intently. Tomorrow, during the recess. The human won't see it coming. His lips thinned. Whatever Vrikai and the Zervath planned, it would happen soon. He didn't have the luxury of waiting for them to act. His fingers tapped the edge of the desk as he considered his options. Diplomacy had its place, but so did strategy. And sometimes, the best defense was a preemptive strike. He rose, his movements precise as he prepared. His diplomatic attire concealed more than mere tools of statecraft. Hidden within its seams were advanced counter-surveillance tech, miniature EMP disruptors, and a compact plasma blade disguised as a ceremonial pen. Humanity had learned long ago that peace was best achieved when backed by strength. By the time he left his quarters, the station was quieter, the corridors sparsely populated. Alaric moved with the ease of someone who had memorized the complex's layout, his route taking him toward the restricted sections. Accessing Vrikai's private chambers would be risky, but risk was something he had lived with his entire career. He bypassed 2 checkpoints using forged credentials Earth's intelligence agency had provided, a contingency he hadn't expected to use so soon. The guards stationed near Vrikai's chambers didn't even glance at him as he walked past, their focus on their datapads. When he reached the entrance, he activated a device on his wrist, disabling the security grid for precisely 45 seconds. The door slid open, and Alaric slipped inside, the faint hiss of the seal resealing behind him. Vrikai's chambers were as opulent as one might expect of a high council, walls lined with shimmering fabrics, data terminals glowing softly, and a central console that pulsed with energy. Alaric approached the console, his movements quick and efficient as he plugged in a data siphon. Files streamed onto the device, encrypted layers peeling back under the sophisticated algorithms Earth's engineers had developed. Names, dates, schematics, it was all here. Alaric's eyes narrowed as he scanned the data. The plan wasn't just about him. It was about humanity. Vrikai had been working to block Earth's admission for months, spreading disinformation and leveraging alliances to paint humanity as dangerous and unfit for Council membership. And then he saw it, a schematic for an explosive device. Its placement, the Council chamber. The recess tomorrow wasn't a diplomatic pause, it was a death sentence. The blast would kill delegates, including Alaric, and the blame would be placed squarely on humanity. A sound behind him made him freeze. He turned slowly, the plasma blade already in his hand, its faint glow casting eerie shadows. A figure stepped into view, a Zervath enforcer, their claws clicking against the floor. "You shouldn't be here, human," the enforcer growled. Alaric's lips curved into a humorless smile. "Neither should you." The fight was quick and brutal. The enforcer lunged, but Alaric sidestepped, his blades slashing through the Zervath's arm with precision. They roared in pain, swinging wildly, but Alaric was faster. He drove the blade into their chest, the hum of plasma silencing the enforcer as they collapsed. He deactivated the blade and retrieved the data siphon, his heartbeat steady. Time was running out. The Council needed to know the truth, but trust was a fragile thing, and Vrikai's influence ran deep. He couldn't rely on the delegates' goodwill alone. As he slipped back into the corridors, Alaric's mind raced. Tomorrow's recess would be a turning point. One way or another, humanity's future in the stars would be decided, not by words, but by actions. And Alaric Graves was prepared to ensure Earth's survival, no matter the cost. The council chamber was quieter than usual, the air thick with an unspoken tension that rippled through the assembled delegates. Alaric stood at his podium, his face calm but his mind sharp, every fiber of his being attuned to the threat lurking beneath the surface. The schematics he'd uncovered haunted his thoughts, a bomb designed to ignite chaos and turn the council against humanity before they'd even had a chance to prove their worth. Now, standing here, he knew he was walking directly into a trap. Rikai's voice carried through the chamber, smooth and practiced. Before we proceed with further discussions, we shall take a brief recess. Use this time to reflect on the matter at hand. Humanity's place in this council must not be decided lightly. His multifaceted eyes flickered toward Alaric, a fleeting glance heavy with veiled intent. As the delegates began to disperse, Alaric stayed rooted in place, his gaze fixed on the High Council. The Zervith delegate passed him, their scaled lips curling into a faint sneer. Enjoy the quiet while it lasts, human. It may be the last silence you ever hear. Alaric responded with an empty smile, his voice steady. Careful, Zervith. Your threats are showing. The alien hissed softly before moving on, and Alaric turned toward the exit. His steps were unhurried, his diplomatic facade firmly in place, but beneath the surface, his mind was a whirlwind of calculations. He needed to act quickly. The bomb's placement in the chamber made its intent clear: maximum casualties, with humanity painted as the aggressor. The evidence he'd stolen from Rikai's chambers was damning, but revealing it now, without eliminating the immediate threat, would only lead to panic and destruction. As he exited the chamber, he subtly activated the communicator embedded in his wrist. Command, this is Graves. Situation critical. I need confirmation of access to Level 5 emergency overrides. A crackle of static preceded the calm voice of his handler. Commander, Level 5 is authorized. Proceed with caution. Are you certain you can manage this alone? Not a matter of choice. Alaric muttered, his tone dry. I'll handle it. Keep the line open. The corridors outside the chamber were empty, the delegates having retreated to private lounges and discussion rooms. Alaric moved with purpose, his steps taking him toward the lower levels of the Velum Accord complex where maintenance systems and security overrides were housed. Each corner he turned was a potential ambush point, but his instincts, honed through years of covert operations, kept him sharp. As he reached the access hatch leading to the restricted maintenance zone, a low voice called out behind him. Graves. You don't think you're leaving without a proper escort, do you? He turned, his jaw tightening as two Zervith enforcers approached, their weapons held casually but their intent clear. Alaric's hand hovered near his belt, where the plasma blade rested, concealed but ready. Escort? I wasn't aware the Zervith provided such generous hospitality. The lead enforcer, a towering figure with gleaming black scales, tilted his head. The Consul has taken a special interest in you. He thought it prudent that we ensure your safety. Alaric's smile didn't reach his eyes. How thoughtful. The enforcers stepped closer, their movements slow but deliberate, and Alaric's mind raced. He couldn't afford a prolonged confrontation here, not with time slipping through his fingers like sand. He let his hand drop, seemingly in surrender, but his fingers brushed the concealed device on his wrist. In a split second, the EMP disruptor activated, sending a pulse of energy rippling through the corridor. The enforcer's weapons sparked and died, and Alaric moved. He drove his elbow into the nearest enforcer's throat, cutting off their snarl of surprise. Spinning, he disarmed the second with a sharp twist of their wrist, the weapon clattering to the floor. Before they could recover, Alaric slammed the hilt of his plasma blade into their temple, dropping them unconscious. The first enforcer lunged, claws outstretched, but Alaric sidestepped, igniting the blade in a flash of blue light. The weapon hissed as it cut through the enforcer's armored shoulder, sending them sprawling with a roar of pain. Alaric deactivated the blade and crouched, grabbing the enforcer by their collar. Who else knows? His voice was ice, every syllable laced with quiet fury. The enforcer bared their teeth but said nothing. Alaric's grip tightened, his patience razor-thin. "You don't want me to ask twice." The enforcer hissed something in their native tongue, curses, most likely, and Alaric released them with a shove, letting their unconscious forms slump against the wall. Time was too short for interrogations. He stepped through the access hatch, sealing it behind him. The maintenance zone was a labyrinth of conduits and glowing panels, the hum of machinery filling the air. Alaric navigated it with practiced ease, following the schematics he'd memorized earlier. His destination was the chamber's central power grid, a location that would offer the most control over the bomb's activation systems. As he moved, he replayed Vrikai's words in his mind, the subtle smugness that had laced every syllable. The consul thought he'd won already, that Alaric was just another pawn to be swept off the board. That arrogance would be his undoing. At the power grid, Alaric accessed the central console, his fingers moving swiftly over the controls. The bomb's signal was faint but traceable, its frequency encoded to mimic routine power surges. He isolated it, his brow furrowing as he calculated the timing. The device was set to detonate in under 15 minutes, just enough time for the delegates to return to the chamber, sealing their fate. "Command, this is Graves. Bomb located. Disarming now." The response crackled in his ear. "Acknowledged. Backup is en route, but ETA is 20 minutes. Too late," Alaric muttered. His fingers worked faster, overriding layers of encryption with Earth's specialized algorithms. The bomb's failsafes triggered, but Alaric was already ahead of them, rerouting energy bursts to neutralize the secondary triggers. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his focus didn't waver. Finally, the console beeped, the signal's frequency flatlining. Alaric exhaled slowly, his muscles relaxing for the first time in hours. The bomb was inert, its threat neutralized, but the real battle was just beginning. He downloaded the remaining data onto a secure drive and turned, heading back toward the chamber. As he emerged into the corridors, the sounds of returning delegates filled the air. Alaric's jaw tightened. He had no intention of letting Vrikai walk away from this unscathed. He adjusted his jacket, ensuring the data drive was secure, and strode back into the chamber. The delegates were already taking their places, their conversations a low hum of speculation. Vrikai stood at the center, his posture regal, his antennae flicking with a faint hint of satisfaction. Alaric stepped onto his podium, his voice carrying across the room. "High Consul, before we continue, I believe there's something the Council should see." He held up the drive, his expression cold and unyielding. "A demonstration of your own resourcefulness." Vrikai's eyes narrowed, the faintest crack in his facade. The chamber fell silent as Alaric inserted the drive into the central display, the damning evidence flooding the room in a cascade of light. The truth was out, and the weight of it was undeniable. The silence that gripped the council chamber was absolute, the kind of silence that followed a moment of collective disbelief. The holographic display floated in the center of the room, casting sharp, shifting light across the gathered delegates. Detailed schematics of the explosive device hovered alongside intercepted communications between Vrikai and the Zervath. The evidence was clear, undeniable, and damning. Vrikai's antennae twitched imperceptibly as he stood motionless at the center of the chamber, his golden exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh light. The delegates watched him, their expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed fury. Alaric remained on his podium, his gaze locked onto Vrikai with the calm intensity of a predator who had cornered its prey. "This is preposterous!" Vrikai's voice broke the silence, his tone sharp and commanding. "A fabrication, a desperate attempt by the human to deflect attention from their species' unfitness for this council." Alaric didn't flinch. "Fabrication?" His voice was measured, cold. "The intercepted transmissions were pulled directly from your secure network. Your codes, your orders, your plan." Vrikai's mandibles clicked in agitation. "A ruse! Perhaps the humans have tampered with our systems to frame us." The Growlith delegate, who had been silent until now, leaned forward, their compound eyes glittering with suspicion. "You claim this is false, Consul, yet the evidence is overwhelming." Do you deny the bomb exists? Of course I deny it, Rikai snapped, his voice rising. This is a smear campaign orchestrated by a species desperate to claw its way into our council. Alaric allowed the murmur of the delegates to rise before speaking again, his voice cutting through the growing tension like a blade. If this is a fabrication, then you won't mind if we investigate your private chambers, where I found these files. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And the activation device. The room erupted in whispers, the ripple of shock spreading like a wave. Rikai's multifaceted eyes darted from delegate to delegate, his control slipping as the tide of sentiment turned against him. The Zervath delegate attempted to interject, but their voice was drowned in the growing chorus of accusations and demands for accountability. This is absurd, Rikai shouted, his composure cracking. I am the High Consul. You will not defile my office based on the word of a human. Your position does not grant you immunity from justice, the Tvalari representative said calmly, their melodic voice cutting through the noise. If there is even a possibility that you have conspired to jeopardize this council, it must be investigated. Alaric folded his arms, his expression unyielding. I've already disabled the bomb. The delegates are safe for now. But the fact remains that this council's trust has been betrayed from within. The Zervath delegate snarled, but before they could speak, the Tvalari representative gestured for silence. Ambassador Graves, you claim to have retrieved this evidence personally. Did you witness anything further to implicate the consul directly? Alaric hesitated for the briefest moment, choosing his words carefully. The files and transmissions were locked behind layers of encryption designed to obscure their origin. Only someone with the consul's authority could have accessed the systems I infiltrated. The connections are too specific to be coincidental. The Growlithe delegate spoke again, their tone heavy with disdain. It seems clear that Rikai has much to answer for. Rikai's claws twitched, his composure now fully unraveled. You fools! You take the word of a human, an unproven species, over mine? After all I've done to secure this council's stability? Alaric's voice was sharp and unyielding. Your stability is built on lies, High Consul. You were willing to sacrifice lives to maintain your grip on power. This isn't about humanity's place in the council. It's about your fear of change, your fear of what humanity represents. Rikai lunged forward, his golden frame imposing but his movements wild. The delegates recoiled, their platforms retreating instinctively. Alaric stood firm, his stance steady. What now, Rikai? Violence? You've already tried that once today. It didn't work then, and it won't work now. Rikai hesitated, his mandibles clicking in frustration, before stepping back. You'll regret this, he hissed, his voice low and venomous. The council will regret this. The Tvalari representative stood, their expression unreadable. High Consul Rikai, as the senior member of this council, I hereby motion for your immediate suspension pending a full investigation into these allegations. Delegates, cast your votes. The room was silent as the delegates began to cast their votes, their platforms glowing either green or red to signify their decisions. One by one, the platforms turned green, the vote overwhelmingly in favor of suspension. Rikai's platform dimmed, the symbol of his authority vanishing as the council's decision solidified. You've sealed your fate. Rikai spat, his voice trembling with rage. Guards approached, their weapons raised as they flanked him. He cast a final glare at Alaric, his multifaceted eyes blazing with hatred. This isn't over, human. Not by a long shot. Alaric met his gaze without flinching. No, it's not. But next time, I'll be ready. As Rikai was led away, the chamber remained silent, the weight of the moment heavy on every delegate. The Tvalari representative turned to Alaric, their expression softening slightly. Ambassador Graves, you have done this council a great service today. Humanity's place here is no longer a question. Alaric inclined his head, his face betraying nothing. I didn't do this for humanity's place. I did it to protect the principles this council claims to stand for. Let's hope we can all uphold them. The Growlithe delegate leaned forward, their voice tinged with grudging respect. You are unlike any diplomat we have encountered, human. Perhaps your kind will prove more interesting than we anticipated. Alaric allowed himself a small, humorless smile. We're full of surprises. The session adjourned, and the delegates began to disperse, their voices rising again in muted conversation. Alaric remained on his platform for a moment longer, his gaze sweeping the chamber. The battle had been won, but he knew the war was far from over. Trust was a fragile thing, and humanity's presence in the galaxy would always be met with suspicion and challenge. As he stepped off the platform and made his way toward the exit, his communicator buzzed softly. His handler's voice came through, calm but with an edge of urgency. Graves, we've got new intel. There may be fallout from today's events. There always is, Alaric replied. Send me the details. I'll handle it. The corridor stretched ahead of him, long and shadowed, but Alaric walked it with purpose. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on. Humanity had taken its first step into the stars, and Alaric Graves would make sure they kept moving forward, no matter the cost.